Hello and welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rob Van Bergen, and today I'm joined by Lloyd Burrell. Lloyd is creator of the international award-winning docuseries Electric Universe, author of the Amazon bestseller Healing with Vibration, author of the EMF Practical Guide, and founder of electricsense.com, which has had over 14 million visits since its inception in 2009. Lloyd is passionate about energy mastery and helping people understand their true energetic nature and live a life of elevated health, purpose, and consciousness. Today, Lloyd and I talk about the invisible dangers of electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, and how these are connected to pain and disease. Lloyd also provides some excellent actionable tips to help us protect ourselves from the cellular dangers of EMFs, all of which can be started today for little to no financial investment.
Welcome back to Pain Free for Life, where we share how to successfully overcome all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And now, here's your host, co-founder, and board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Dr. Rob Van Bergen.
All right. Hello, Lloyd. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rob. It's great to be here.
Well, I know you're kind of a leading expert in the field of EMFs, and this is something that concerns me. It concerns patients and clients of ours. And I know it concerns my dad, everyone really in the alternative health space that has heard of EMFs and that is concerned about their potential. So I'm going to ask you some questions about these. And I think we should start from a perspective of what if you have no idea what EMFs are? How would you describe them to someone that's just sitting here being like, what's an EMF?
Yeah. So what's an EMF? Well, literally, what does EMF mean to me is electromagnetic field. Just start with absolutely the stating perhaps what is not obvious, because some people say electromagnetic frequency. So I'm actually, when I say EMF, I'm talking about electromagnetic field. And so most people have heard of that, but they don't really know what it means. So what is an electromagnetic field? Well, it's an invisible force. Well, that really doesn't tell us too much either. But what I can say is that these invisible forces, electromagnetic fields, are absolutely fundamental to our health, to our life, and to our planet, because we live in an electromagnetic universe. And electromagnetic forces are at play throughout our life and always have been ever since man first walked on the earth, and woman, and even before that. So, and what I'm saying there, so it's, when you look at the Earth's magnetic core, we've got this magnetic field, this geomagnetic field, which is generated. We walk, we go outside, we're exposed to the sun. What is sun? Electromagnetic energy. So all of this is electromagnetism, and we need it to survive. And we are electromagnetic beings. We have this energetic anatomy, the chakras and the meridians and the biofield and all of this. And we've got science behind this, which is little known, but I'm sure you know about this. But what I'm talking about more specifically are things like cell phones, smart meters, Bluetooth, anything smart, because our homes are filled with these devices. I mean, we can't even begin to imagine where they're putting smart chips on toothbrushes, on diapers, yes, for babies. How sick is that? And literally, these frequencies, these man-made frequencies, are taking over our world. And the question is, well, okay. Well, the controversy is really, is that okay? And the short answer is no. That is not okay in terms of what it's doing to our health. And I can talk about the dangers if you like. But yeah, that's really in a nutshell. And it's this non-ionizing radiation and this fantasy that, frankly, our governments, that the telecom people, that the utilities even, this fantasy world that they're living in saying that non-ionizing, that's to say cell phone radiation, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of these things, that is somehow safe, and that ionizing is not safe. Ionizing, like anything nuclear, to really make it very simple, X-rays. Everybody knows that's not safe, but these other things, people are not aware, and so that's what I've been sharing, because I have my own health story with this. I think, as you know, which started over 20 years ago. I got very, very sick. So, and I didn't know about the science, and I didn't know anything about all of this, and so this is how it all started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this conflict between the healthy EMFs that we have, as you said, the earth and things like that, that is being overshadowed by the swamp of EMFs that were created. I mean, right now I look around me. In order to enable me doing this podcast, I've got cameras, I've got a computer, I've got my phone, I've got electronics over there. I mean, everything in this room is powering something and emitting an electromagnetic field. And my house even is a few years old. It's a fairly new house. And I did not know when I moved in until the telephone guy came to hook up the internet and was like, well, where's your smart box? And he found this box in my closet downstairs that's just wires and everything all built in. There's a plug in every room that connects to the internet and lets internet out. And it blew my mind that things have gotten to that point of being so saturated. And you spoke about how we could talk about the dangers of some of this stuff as well. But one thing that constantly gets brought up to me by some of my clients that look into this is there not military applications to electromagnetic fields? It's something they actually work on, right?
Well, there are. Where we are now is we're on the 5th generation of wireless technology. And of course, when we say wireless, anything wireless is actually the real word, or the scientific word for that is radio frequency microwave radiation. So wireless sounds kind of groovy and cool, but radio frequency microwave radiation, do you want to be exposed to that? And that's what all of this is, all of that, which we've been talking about, this Bluetooth and this smart and all of this. And there are military applications for this, notably the 5G frequencies, because we're now moving into this world of 5G, 5th generation, of our cell phones, and we have it in France. And in the US and Canada also, I believe, these frequencies are very high. So they're already very high because cell phones work in the gigahertz range. So it's 1 billion cycles a second compared to, for instance, your electricity, which is 50 or 60. It's actually 60 hertz a second in the US and the Canada also, I believe. And 1 billion cycles a second. And so these phones are working, it depends, it's different frequencies, different parts of the world, but they have been working at 1 to 2 gigahertz. And with 5G, all that's changing because it's saturated. As you were alluding to, these frequencies bands are saturated. And by the way, they make a load of money when they sell these off. This is the crux of the thing is the money. They can make so much money out selling these frequencies out governments. And then all of these companies, obviously Apple and so on, which make loads of money, which I've got nothing against, but it's the how this is harming people. So, and the 5G, because we're having to move into these higher frequencies, they're using the frequencies which have been used for crowd control by the military. And why are they using those frequencies? Because they hurt people. So this is concerning, very concerning, and increasingly concerning what all of this technology is doing and how it's taking over our world. And particularly when you look at the science, and I can develop on that if you want a little bit, but there's a lot of science behind this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dive into that. One thing that always hits me hard is this idea, and it's hard to come to this from a perspective of you believe you're in a place where you're safe, and then you're looking at stuff that potentially, as you said, is invisible, but that is not safe. And there's also this belief among some that, well, our governments aren't going to let bad stuff happen, right? They're not going to let this sort of stuff happen. But there's a lot of scientists, a lot of science that are against the EMFs. There's been petitions across the world. One thing that's hit me hard was I'd found the Telecommunications Act in the States that said that regardless of environmental or health effects, no state or local government can regulate the placement of any cell towers. So,
yes.
and now with these 5G, correct me if I'm wrong, these 5G cell towers are these tiny little things that they've got to have all over the place, right? It's not just
Correct.
one big tower in the distance. It's thousands of micro towers or
Correct.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it's the higher frequencies, because the higher we go in the frequency, the less the penetrative power. And so they've used the best frequencies, which have got the highest penetrative power, which can go into homes and basements and stuff even. And I'm sure you've seen that. And now we're moving into these higher frequencies. And the downside of that is they don't go as far. Therefore, they need to put these little boxes everywhere, these antennas, small cells, they call them, everywhere. But on top of that, they're also beaming down 5G from space.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of thousands of satellites are going up into space to support this whole network. And that's completely new and also very disturbing. But yeah, I mean, just to answer you on the science, so there is decades of science on this, which nobody really talks about. And it is being deliberately swept under the carpet. But there are very real adverse biological effects. And these are the science is all focused around the effects to our cells, basically, because we are made of cells, essentially. And so we're talking about cell membrane damage. The cell membrane is, of course, very important. It's not just this casing of the cell. It's like the important part of the cell. Cell membrane damage, enzyme damage, DNA single and double strand breaks, stem cell damage, mitochondrial damage, mitochondrial DNA damage. The mitochondria, as you know, is the little energy factories in our cells. And I'm sure some people are at least aware just how important that is, because mitochondrial dysfunction is at the core of so many diseases. And that's sort of what's happening at the cellular level. And lots of great research done on this by Dr. Martin Paul, who's really found the mechanism of how this all messes up our cells, if you want. The spanner in the works is this what's happening in these voltage gated calcium channels. But anyway, we won't get too geeky, but it's the science is very clear on what it's damaging, how it's damaging it. And the thing is, when you say EMFs are bad news because of these adverse biological effects, that doesn't really get anybody going too much, it doesn't, that's not too concerning. But when you say that it's associated with a long list of serious diseases, and I can give you those diseases, including cancer, including Alzheimer's, including Parkinson's, including diabetes, including cardiovascular disease. I mean, frankly, and it's causing your cells to prematurely age. That's the thing. And there's a term being given for that, rapid aging syndrome, by Professor Magda Havas, Trent University, Canada. So all of this put together is really very concerning. And I'm not here to scaremonger. I'm just, I started out on this, as I think because I got kids and I wanted other parents to know just how dangerous this was. And this is actually the most vulnerable sector of the population are our children, are our elderly, and our pregnant women. And so this is really something that everybody should be aware of. And I always say to people, because a lot of people think, well, I'm fine, I've got my cell phone and, I use it and I'm fine. I can't feel anything. But here's the thing. It's not because you're fine and you can't feel anything that these man-made EMFs are not impacting you. They are. That is what the science is saying. And the science is saying this very clearly. It's not saying certain people are affected. It's saying certain people are affected more than others, those what I just mentioned, but everybody is being impacted. The difference is that some people can feel it. I'm no longer electrically hypersensitive. I could really feel it at one time, and that's so I've gone. That's no longer an issue for me. I do not have these debilitating symptoms, but there's a small part of the population which do, but they just happen to be the people that can feel it, but everybody's been impacted. That's the key thing. And the second key thing that I'd like everybody to understand is that it's cumulative, all of this damage. That's what the science is saying. It's cumulative. And so there is corrective action you can take, obviously. But if you are going through life and saying, well, no, it's not a problem, EMFs are fine and they're not affecting me, you're wrong. They're affecting everybody. And this is something everybody should be aware of, and particularly parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an interesting point to make about that cumulative damage, because it's something we see across the board. I mean, the chances of that teenager that smoked a cigarette one time getting lung cancer and cell damage from that to a degree that's going to completely destroy them is very low. But that chain smoker that's been smoking for 50 years is more likely to have that impact on it as well. So that buildup, because this is not something that we can really just escape. I know of people that do move to remote locations, and that helps. But it's like you said, if the surface of the planet is being hit by these satellites from space, saturated with 5G, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to escape it.
It is.
And, I know, I'll ask you the question, but I know my experience with clients is that EMFs can certainly cause pain, right? And as you said, they are linked to diseases.
Well, that's how it started with me. I 22 years ago, one day I answered my phone and out the blue, and I never do this anymore. It's on airplane mode, mine at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I never use the phone like this anymore. I went 19 years without a phone. And the only reason I've got a phone is you can't do anything without a phone. I mean, there's so many things like, access to bank accounts and things, and all our world is centered around these devices now. So literally from one moment to the next, or within the space of a very short time, minutes, I was in pain. And this is how, and I remember this day, it was February 2002. I was working outside. I had a rental business at the time, and the phone rang. I scrambled out, put it to my ear, and I just felt kind of woozy, like a dizziness, wasn't quite sure what was going on. And then it was the second call, really. And then the pain kicked in, and it was this very clear pain. I got all these symptoms: hot head, prickly skin, and fatigue was another one, which is not pain. We couldn't consider that pain, but so sensitive eyes, sensitivity to light, anxiety, depression, weight loss, weight gain, body-wide aches and pains. And then years down the line, or more than 10 years down the line, very bad digestive issues relating to that, set off a whole thing with gluten intolerance. And I thought I'd sort of got over it, and I hadn't. So yes, but the thing is, the pain was actually a good thing, because if I hadn't got the pain, I wouldn't have took the action, and I wouldn't be speaking to you here today and sharing this message. And it was tough because it lasted years, this pain, and I was really lost and confused, and the doctors didn't have any answers, and I had to pretty much figure this out for myself. But yeah, so there is, and it's these frequencies impact different people in different ways, and tinnitus is another one I should mention. That's very frequent with this. And certainly the headaches, and also people I've got friends who say, because they know about me and what I do and what I talk about, they say, well, yeah, using my cell phone, and, when I'm texting, sometimes I can feel it in my wrist and things like that. So, yeah, very clearly there is pain. But I always said, if you get the pain, you're lucky. You're lucky, because that will make you take action. It's the people who don't get the pain who are the ones that will go, well, no, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. I'm fine. I'm going to die of something anyway, kind of talk, and so, yeah. So pain and no pain, but the effects, the adverse biological effects are there. And that's really the important thing to understand.
And I know that the condition associated with EMFs, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, right?
Yes.
I believe, unless they've changed their tune, North America does not recognize that as a medical condition. Is that still true?
Correct.
But in Europe, they do in certain places?
They are. And now I believe in Sweden, it's recognized as a handicap, I think it is.
Yeah.
But it's, broadly speaking, it's not recognized, and it's kind of ridiculed. It's ridiculed in the media, and tin hat people, tin hat foil hats, and all of that. And it's just not taken seriously, and which is terrible as well, because you're suffering from something, and then you're being made to look like some kind of freak. So that is disturbing for those people. But again, it's really the people that I'm addressing. Well, my mission is to help those people. And then it's this, it's to share this awareness and say, well, because I am speaking about the science, but I'm saying, look, this is really serious. This can hurt you, and this can hurt your children. And again, I keep saying children because I think that's so important. And the science is very clear on this, which is like 30-year-old science now, that shows that children are more vulnerable, that children aren't just small adults. They're not fully developed. Their immune systems aren't developed. Cellularly, they're not developed. They can't protect themselves from this. So that's, if you don't want to take action for yourself, then at least protect your children. And there are things you can do to make this safer. And I can share a few, talk about that a little bit if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just emphasize that as well. I think one of the things that's become the most dangerous thing in the last 20 years is the idea of tablets, iPads, shoving them in a toddler's hands and letting them wander off with these things that are connected to the internet. And then cell phones to kids, like in really, really young ages too. Like you've got elementary school, grade 2 kids walking around with smartphones. And why?
Yeah.
We lived a long time without them.
Yes. Why? For political reasons, often. And there is some backlash on this. But when there is backlash, that's to say, they're bringing in rules and regulations to protect children. They're not talking about EMFs. I don't know if you noticed that. They talk about social media, which is another problem, a huge problem, but they don't talk about EMFs. You don't see that in your national or local newspaper or whatever, because it's controversial, because of the money, because a lot of those newspapers and media outlets, they're kind of bought and paid for by big telecom and so on. And that's why you're not hearing this information, the truth about what's really going on. But and then there's the blue light. I mean, that's just another whole topic with children. I mean, I continue to hear of kids, smallish kids, under 10s, sleeping with a cell phone under their pillow. I mean, parents, come on, what have you got between your ears? So yeah, this is a concern, and there's a whole around this world of cell phones. It is concerning about this how this is changing our society, and unfortunately, this debate about that is completely overlooking this EMF aspect, despite all of this science. And it really is very clear as soon as you start looking at it. But most people don't read the studies, of course. And the only reason I read the studies is because I was feeling it. My health had been impacted.
Yeah, so obviously this is something that is all around us. It's something that is harder and harder to escape. So how do you go about protecting yourself in this EMF world that we live in?
Right. So what I'm going to share with you, so it really is life changing for somebody like me, what I had to do and how I now live compared to how I lived before. And I was already fairly clean living. I was living in France. I live in France. I live near the coast. We eat French food, which is very good food. It's not like in the US. There's no um, GMOs and all of that, and it's not genetically modified, or it's and I was looking at, I was working out, and I was working outside even, and so I shouldn't have got this, but I did, and so I had to do a lot. But for people, what I'm going to share is some really EMF censored tips or a strategy, and the way to remember this, I call it the OM. And when I say that, I do it like that so people remember and the is U for understand, M for measure, and M for mitigate. So first thing is like just understand the thing. And really what there is to understand is not that complicated. There is a bit of a learning curve at the beginning, but it's really quite simple. And there are 4 categories of electromagnetic fields which we need to look at. There's the radio frequency microwave radiation, which is all we've really talked about so far, Rob. We've got the electric fields, the magnetic fields, and the dirty electricity. And those other 3 are actually what comes from your wiring. What? The wiring? But that's wires. Those are safe. No, not electricity wires. Because unfortunately, unless you've got shielded wiring, unfortunately, wiring is transporting electricity, which as soon as you've got current flowing, you've got a magnetic field. If you've got no current flowing, you've got an electric field. And you have also dirty electricity. And that's the kind of colloquial term for intermediary frequencies in the kilohertz range, which Russian research has shown that impacts our health and links to cancer also. So those are the 4 categories we need to understand. And then we need, and so it's like, well, okay, well, what is this? What is this creating in terms of EMFs? Obviously, it's creating RFs, radio frequencies, but also is creating magnetic fields, the battery, but to a small extent. But the main problem is the RFs, the radio frequency microwave radiation. That's the main concern. And then for each.
Yeah, sorry, I just interrupt. Just for people that are just listening and not watching the video, that was a cell phone we were talking about there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very good. And so that's the understanding, and then measure. So, and I'm going to share after, if we've got time, I'm going to share some tips for people that don't have meters. But what I would suggest, really, very strongly, is at some point you equip yourself with a meter. And so this approach is based on conventional science, okay, and accepted science, the kind of science building biologists and EMF consultants are using. And they wouldn't use a meter like this because this is a consumer meter and it costs under $200. But this is like, frankly, in this day and age, this is as essential for somebody that's health conscious, certainly, as having a screwdriver in your home. You want one of these because you want to know what the magnetic fields are, which you put it here. And I don't know if you can hear that. It sounds a little bit like a Geiger counter. And obviously, we've got people that are on audio, so they won't see any of this. But this is a tri-field TF2. And I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah, I'm sure you can. And that's the electric fields. And then we put it here, RF. And that is very low because I don't have any Wi-Fi here. Obviously, my cell phone is switched off, although there is a reading because, here, like everywhere else in the world, we have RFs. So that's what I would recommend to measure and do a little EMF audit of your home, but most importantly, your bedroom, because your bedroom is absolutely crucial to get that to be low EMF, because that's when your body heals. Basically, when you go to bed, you've got cellular detoxification, regeneration, all of these processes going on, hormonal interaction, melatonin being created. By the way, the RFs suppress the melatonin production. So that's just in itself huge, because we know how important that is to protect us from cancer, and it's an antioxidant, etc. So that's the what we would need, and we can already measure the 3 categories with that, and then another meter at some point, not necessarily straight away. And this is a bit yellow because it's a bit old, this one, sorry, and it's got a kind of funky French plug on it. And that is to measure dirty electricity, and it's called a Stetsonizer meter. And you just plug it in, and you're looking for a reading below 50. That's what the manufacturers recommend. And so, yeah, at some point, you need to be able to measure. And then thirdly, of this so we've done the understand, the measure, and then we need to mitigate. What do we mean by that? We mean reducing our exposure, quite simply. And there's 3 ways to mitigate. First thing is turn the thing off. Turn the darn thing off. This is turned off. It's on airplane mode. It's not fully turned off, but it's on airplane mode. So many things in your home which you can turn off really very easily. Obviously, not your fridge freezer, folks. But turn the thing off. That's the first thing you can do. Second thing you can do is increase the distance between you and the device. And as soon as you increase the distance, you exponentially reduce your exposure. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of times or millions of times. It really is. It's an exponential relationship, not a linear one. So you get massive benefit just by increasing distance. And the way to remember this is distance is your friend. With all of this EMF stuff, distance is your friend. And thirdly, is to shield. The third way of dealing with it is to shield. And that is really, so I'm not going to go into it unless you want me to, particularly, because that's sort of more, a little bit more complicated, and it involves buying special material and so on. But for most people, that's the protocol. And then if you like, if we've got time, I can just talk very quickly about what you can do with the cell phone, Wi-Fi and stuff like that, to give people a few tips.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
So with a cell phone, distance is your friend. We're working from that. And because people said, well, what's the safest cell phone, Lloyd? I don't know, because we don't even have a way of comparing them, a reliable way of comparing them. I don't have a laboratory, and the accepted way of comparing them is the telecoms way of comparing them, which is not a good way of comparing them. It's like it suits them, but not us. It really doesn't tell us anything. So what is important is how you use the phone. So it would seem from the data, because there is data on it's called specific absorption rate, and that's how people are comparing it. But that is unreliable because we know from PhoneGate, which is a French doctor who actually did this, who found that what these cell phone companies are sharing the data is wrong. It's not reliable. They're telling us fibs. So we can't rely on the data. And so what do? Well, we never use it like this. Put it next to our ear. We never put it next to our ear to make a phone call, because we want as much distance between the device and ourselves as we can. We prefer to text rather than talk, but don't go silly either on the texting all day long, because then you could start to experience similar symptoms to what I talked about earlier in your hands and wrists and so on. And so we're putting it on airplane mode as much as possible. And it's that little airplane, that cute little airplane at the top there. But even then, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on full airplane mode. So you need to go in the settings. It is a bit of a palaver the first time you do it. And all phones are different. And to look at, make sure that your Bluetooth is switched off, that the Wi-Fi is switched off, that the cellular connectivity is switched off. And you have to do this kind of manually. But as soon as you've done it a few times, it's very simple. And so carrying it on your body, that's what you want to do, because we are these electromagnetic fields with this. We're all surrounded by this beautiful energy. And this really perturbs that energy, and that's what all this adverse biological effects, that's what that is saying. And so that's the first thing, very, very quickly, with cancer, with cell phones, is to also look at the bars here at the top and only use it when you've got all the bars, because your phone can emit a million times more radiation with one bar compared to 4 bars. Wow. And there's no industry standard for that either. It's whatever really suits them. But that's what some independent labs have found, which is pretty shocking. People don't know this.
No.
So those are some very quick tips with regard to your cell phone. I know pretty much everybody's got a cell phone, so that's why it's important. With regard to Wi-Fi, very quickly, Wi-Fi, the best is to go Ethernet, so to have a cable. Like youngsters, they don't know what that means. They don't know you can put a cable in. I mean, but so I never had Wi-Fi and I got sick. So I always knew what the cable was for. But you can actually connect via cable. Most people won't want to do that. But switching off your Wi-Fi at night, that makes a lot of sense. Because again, we're back to the thing of the bedroom and when you sleep, how your body recovers and heals. So switching off your Wi-Fi at night, and there's a little trick you can do for that, which is to buy one of those timers we use to fool the burglars to put on the lights in the home.
Lights. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And plug it in via that and set it to switch off automatically between whatever it is, midnight and 6 a.m. And already your body will go like, oh, thank God, whatever. And so that is something very easy to do, inexpensive. And the third thing I just want to say, because we've not really talked about this at all, is wired exposures. Because again, most people, when they hear this the first time, they're surprised or shocked that we could have EMFs from wiring, but we can. Therefore, again, back to the bedroom, the most important room, what I recommend is for 1 week, you go to your breaker panel, you switch off on the breaker panel the circuit of the bedroom and the surrounding circuits, if you can figure out what those are. And again, that's why it's really nice to have one of these, because it'll tell you what your exposures are. Because the thing is, when you're sleeping, even though everything's switched off, it's pitch black, you're in an electric field. As soon as you switch your little light on to go for a pee in the middle of the night, then you've got a magnetic field also, because the current's running. And so if you're sleeping in an electric field, you've also exposed to dirty electricity. Whereas if you switch off at the breaker panel, all of that quietens down. And so that's something very simple to do. And then you could look to get an electrician in to install a remote device or automated way of switching this off at night. So I don't sleep with my electricity on in the bedroom, and it's so much better. And again, it's something to try. It might not suit you. I don't know. It might be difficult or whatever. Try. This is it's free.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of good tips there, and actionable tips are always welcome. I think people are like, what do I actually do? How do I actually approach these things? So I'm hoping that people will take advantage of some of those, because the world we live in, as you said, like as electric beings in an electric world, that is just, I don't think there's an end to this on the horizon, right? I mean, it seems to be, I think they're talking about 6G now, right? Yeah. So
yes. And the other thing I just want to say is that all of this, the reason I'm talking about all of this is because this really works for sure. But then you've got other things that work, devices which you can plug in, which I know that you talk about, and that can work. And I'm not against any of that. So some people that talk about, that call themselves EMF experts, which I don't, by the way, but some people call me that, are against all of that kind of thing. I am not. I say try it, suck it and see, because some of these devices do work for some people and for others they don't. But this method, which I've shared with you, that works for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lloyd. I really appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
And to everyone listening, make sure you connect with Lloyd. I'm going to leave all of his information in the show notes at painfreeforlife.com/podcast. So until next time, I'm Dr. Rob Van Bergen, and you're listening to Pain Free for Life.
Thanks for listening to Pain Free for Life. Be sure to follow us, share the show with family and friends, and leave us a review on iTunes. Every time you share the show, you are helping someone take their life back from pain. Visit painfreeforlife.com for more resources, including our free guides to microcurrent, the Hache protocol and inflammation, as well as our blog and online community full of people just like you, successfully overcoming all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And stay tuned for the next episode of Pain Free for Life.